The champagne glass slipped from my right hand, shattering against the marble floor. My daughter didn't even flinch. She just smiled, that cold smile I'd been seeing more and more lately, and said, "Mother's getting clumsy in her old age, isn't she, David?" Her husband, my son-in-law, laughed as he refilled his own glass. "Good thing we're here to take care of things now." I cradled my left wrist against my chest. The pain was excruciating, but I kept my face neutral. The cast wouldn't come off for another 6 weeks, the doctor had said. 6 weeks of being unable to drive, unable to work, unable to do much of anything without help. That's exactly what they'd been counting on. "Dinner's ready," I said quietly, moving toward the dining room. Behind me, I heard my daughter whisper something to David, followed by more laughter. The Christmas tree lights twinkled in the corner of my dining room, casting shadows across the faces of the 8 people seated around my grandmother's mahogany table. My daughter Sarah sat at the far end, her hand resting possessively on David's arm. My sister, Margaret, was there, along with her husband Tom, my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, and her son, and 2 other guests no one had expected, but I'd invited them for a very specific reason. I'd prepared everything one-handed over the past 3 days. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, all of it. Sarah had offered to help exactly 0 times. "I can't believe you're still living in this big house all alone, Mom," Sarah said, her voice dripping with false concern. "It's dangerous. What if you'd fallen down the stairs instead of just—" "How did you hurt your wrist again?" I met her eyes. "I tripped on the rug in my bedroom. You remember the one you kept telling me to get rid of?" "Exactly." She turned to the table. "See? This is what I've been talking about. Mother's not safe here anymore. This house is too much for her." David nodded enthusiastically. "We've been discussing it, actually. Sarah and I think it's time you moved into a nice retirement community. Someplace with staff, you know? People who can help with things." "And what would happen to this house?" Mrs. Chen asked, her voice sharp. She'd been my neighbor for 30 years. She knew exactly what was happening here. Sarah's smile didn't waver. "Well, obviously, it would have to be sold. The property value alone," she caught herself. "I mean, to help pay for Mother's care, of course." "Of course," I said softly. I'd bought this house 43 years ago with my late husband Robert. We'd raised Sarah here. I'd practiced law from the home office upstairs for 25 years before retiring. Every corner held a memory, and it was worth, according to the latest assessment, just over $1.2 million. "You really should consider it, Mom," Sarah pressed. "Especially now, with your injury. What if something worse happens?" The thing is, I'd been a criminal defense attorney. A good one. I'd spent decades reading people, identifying lies, building cases, and I'd known something was wrong for months. It started small. Sarah visiting more often, always with David, always asking questions about my finances, my will, my properties. Then came the suggestions about my age, my health, my declining abilities. The rug in the bedroom, the one I'd supposedly tripped on, had appeared 3 weeks ago. I'd never owned a rug like that. Sarah had brought it, insisting it would warm up the room. I'd removed it the same day. Put it in the garage. That's when I started paying attention. "Actually," I said, setting down my fork carefully with my good hand, "I've been giving it a lot of thought. You're right, Sarah. This house is too much for me." Her eyes lit up. David leaned forward. "But before we discuss that, I'd like to introduce everyone to my other guests." I gestured to the 2 people Sarah and David had barely acknowledged. "This is Detective James Morrison from the County Sheriff's Department." I nodded to the man in the casual blazer. "And this is Patricia Blackwood, a court reporter I worked with for many years." Sarah's smile froze. David's face went pale. "You see," I continued, my voice steady despite the throbbing in my wrist, "I've been documenting some interesting things over the past few weeks. Patricia has been very helpful with that." I pulled out my phone with my good hand and set it on the table. "Would you like to hear a recording from 2 weeks ago?" The conversation you had with David in my kitchen when you thought I was napping upstairs? The color drained from Sarah's face. Or perhaps the text messages between you two, discussing how to speed things along, how a small accident might make me more compliant, how once I was in a facility, you could have me declared incompetent? Mother, I don't know what you're— Stop. My voice cut through her protest like a blade. For the first time in months, I let her see the woman I used to be. The attorney who'd never lost a case when she knew she was right. I'm not finished. I turned to Detective Morrison. On the evening of December 10th, I received a visit from my daughter and son-in-law. They'd offered to help me move some boxes in my bedroom, the heavy ones I'd supposedly been struggling with. During that visit, David positioned himself between me and the doorway. Sarah moved behind me. I felt hands on my back, and then I was falling forward, toward the corner of my dresser. Sarah stood up abruptly. "This is insane! Mom, you're clearly confused." "Sit down," Margaret snapped. My sister had been silent until now, but her face was hard. Let her finish. "I managed to catch myself with my left hand," I continued. "That's how my wrist broke. Not from a rug, from being pushed. And I know it was deliberate because of what you said, Sarah. When you thought I was too dazed to hear clearly, you said, 'Not hard enough.' She should have hit her head." The dining room had gone completely silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. That's when I called Detective Morrison. Well, not immediately. First, I went to the hospital. I made sure the doctor documented everything. The angle of the break, the bruising pattern on my back, all of it. I pulled out a folder from beneath my placemat. Then I spent the last 2 weeks gathering evidence. The rug you brought, I had it tested. Did you know you can get fingerprint analysis done privately now? Your prints were all over it, Sarah. But there's no dust, no wear. It was brand new, purchased specifically to create a cover story. Then there are the financial documents. Patricia spoke up, her voice professional and cool. Mrs. Winters asked me to review her accounts. Apparently, someone has been making inquiries about her assets, calling her bank, her investment advisor, even her insurance company, all using a power of attorney document that was forged with Mrs. Winters' signature. David stood up. "We don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do," Detective Morrison said mildly, "because I'm very interested in hearing the rest." I looked at my daughter, the little girl I'd rocked to sleep, the teenager I'd stayed up late helping with homework, the young woman I'd given half my savings to when she wanted to start her own business, the business that failed within a year, leaving her desperate and angry. "I know you're in debt, Sarah. I know David's construction company is failing. I know you've been counting on this house to save you." She said nothing, just stared at me with something that looked like hatred. "What you didn't count on," I said quietly, "is that I'm not some confused old woman you can manipulate. I'm Eleanor Winters. I practiced law for 3 decades. I know how to build a case, and I've built one against you." I slid the folder across the table to Detective Morrison. "Inside, you'll find copies of everything. The forged power of attorney, the recording of Sarah and David discussing how to handle me, the medical report detailing injuries consistent with being pushed, the financial records showing their debt, text messages, emails, all of it." Margaret reached over and squeezed my good hand. Mrs. Chen's son had his phone out, recording everything. That had been my idea too, multiple witnesses, multiple forms of documentation. "I'm not pressing charges," I said. Both Sarah and David's heads snapped up, hope flickering in their eyes. "Yet. But here's what's going to happen." I let the silence stretch out. "You're going to leave this house tonight and never come back. You're going to return every piece of documentation you've forged or stolen. You're going to close any accounts you've tried to open in my name, and you're going to send me a written statement admitting what you've done. And if we don't?" David's voice was rough. "Then Detective Morrison files the charges. Attempted assault, elder abuse, fraud, forgery. I have enough evidence to put both of you in prison for years." I paused. But more than that, I'll make sure everyone knows. Every friend, every business contact, every person in this town. I still have connections, David. The legal community is small. You'll never work again. Sarah's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who'd scraped her knee and come running to me for comfort. But then her expression hardened. You'd really do this to your own daughter? You really tried to put me in a home so you could steal my house, I replied. So yes, I would. I am. I stood up, my wrist throbbing but my spine straight. I'm going to go rest now. Detective Morrison will escort you out and ensure you take only what you came with. Patricia will witness. Margaret, Mrs. Chen, thank you for being here. As I walked toward the stairs, I heard Sarah start to cry. Part of me, the mother part, wanted to turn back. But the lawyer part, the part that had kept me alive and sharp for 67 years, kept me moving forward. 3 days later, I received a FedEx envelope. Inside was the signed confession, along with every document they'd taken. A week after that, my lawyer informed me that Sarah had officially withdrawn any claim to being my power of attorney or executor. I didn't hear from her for 3 months. Then, on a rainy Tuesday in March, my doorbell rang. She stood there, alone. No, David. Her eyes were red, her face thinner than I remembered. He left, she said without preamble. When he realized there was no money coming, no house to sell, he left. Filed for divorce last week. I said nothing, just waited. I've been going to therapy, she continued. The court mandated it, actually. As part of the deal, your lawyer worked out with the DA, and I've been thinking about what I did, what I almost did. Come in, I said finally, stepping aside. We sat in the living room, the same room where, months ago, she'd been plotting to take everything from me. My wrist had healed by then. Though it ached when it rained, I was desperate, she said. We were going to lose everything. David kept saying if we just had some capital, we could save the business, save the house, save everything. And I stopped seeing you as my mother. I saw you as the solution to my problems. That's not an excuse. I know. She looked down at her hands. I know it's not. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted to tell you that I understand now what I did, what I almost did. And I'm sorry. I studied her face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion and genuine remorse. The therapy is helping? Yeah. I've been diagnosed with depression and anxiety. Apparently, I've had it for years, just never addressed it. And being married to David, he was controlling, manipulative. I didn't see it until he was gone. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked, for the first time in years. About her failed business, her failed marriage, the pressure she'd felt to be successful, about my loneliness after her father died, how I'd buried myself in work to avoid feeling it. When she left, I didn't invite her to come back, but I didn't tell her to stay away either. She came back the next week, and the week after that. Always in the afternoon, always for just an hour or two. We didn't talk about the house or money. We talked about books, about the weather, about her therapy sessions. 6 months later, she asked if she could help me with some yard work. I said yes. We spent the afternoon planting flowers, her on her knees in the dirt, me directing from my porch chair. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Maybe it never would be, but it was something. A year after that Christmas dinner, Margaret asked me if I'd changed my will. Yes, I said. Sarah gets the house when I die, just like before. After everything? After everything. I looked out the window at the garden Sarah and I had planted together, because she's my daughter, and because I believe people can change if they're willing to do the work. She's doing the work. And if she's not? If this is all an act? I smiled, the same smile I used to give opposing counsel in court. Then I have every piece of evidence documented, witnessed, and filed with 3 separate attorneys. She knows what happens if she tries anything again. You really were a hell of a lawyer, Margaret said, shaking her head. I still am, I corrected her. I just don't practice anymore. That night, sitting alone in my dining room with a glass of wine, I thought about that Christmas dinner, about the look on Sarah's face when she realized I'd outplayed her, about David's panic, about the justice of it all. Revenge would have been easy. Pressing charges, watching them go to prison, cutting Sarah out of my life forever. That would have been the loud, dramatic ending everyone expected. But I'd learned something in my years as a lawyer. The best victories aren't always the loudest ones. Sometimes justice is quiet. Sometimes it's giving someone the chance to become better while keeping the power to destroy them if they fail. I still keep the evidence, still have Detective Morrison's number in my phone, still remember exactly how it felt to be pushed toward that dresser, to hear my own daughter wish I'd hit my head harder. But I also remember the look on Sarah's face when I invited her to help me plant roses last spring, the genuine smile when one of them bloomed, the way she hugged me carefully, mindfully before she left. Trust, once broken, never fully heals. But it can be rebuilt, piece by piece, if both people are willing to do the work. My wrist aches sometimes, especially when it rains. It's a reminder, not of what Sarah did to me, but of what I did to survive it. How I fought back not with violence or hatred, but with intelligence and evidence and the quiet certainty that I deserved better. The house is still mine, will be until I die, and then it will be Sarah's, if she continues being the daughter she's become, rather than the daughter she was. And if she doesn't, well, I'm Eleanor Winters. I practiced law for 3 decades. I know how to protect myself. I always have.